Yes, thank you very much, Alistair. Indeed, that's a very interesting question. And as a matter of fact, I think this panel could not have been more timely. I'm going to wear the hat of a professor in risk, and I'm going to start by laying out some facts, because otherwise you cannot do any sort of risk calculation there. Reality is that 2025 has been probably the most difficult year in terms of, in so many different ways, especially when we talk about fires. If I'm not mistaken, and I think I'm not mistaken, and Elena can double check that coming from the Commission, I think it was the worst year since records began in the European Union. I know that the Minister is looking at me, and I saw his statement yesterday, and I have to commend him for saying that this has been quite a successful year for Greece in relation to the European average. Let me tell you something else. This year, I'm very much interested in what happens in the Mediterranean. And it was the first year that I believe that there was a fire in every single Mediterranean country, all of them. The reality, the fact that Syria came back to the world also, was interesting because we found out that there was a huge wildfire there. It was a very prolonged fire season as well. Of all countries, the United Kingdom, I have to remind you, that had a fire season. And actually, London Fire Brigade and the other fire brigades, they issued bulletins and they issued warnings for the people. I lived there for 16 years. When I heard that, I was trying, to see if something, there is, I'm getting older and there is something not working anymore, in my head. But yes, Belgium, the Netherlands, they also had fire seasons, Germany as well. And I know that by laying down this information, I'm painting a very grim picture. But I have to tell you that I'm an optimist. And I believe firmly that crises, with an E, are opportunities for change. There must be a political will. There must be, like the people in the panel before said, that there must be a good communication channel between the academia, the government, and various other actors. In Greece, for instance, the establishment of the Ministry of Civil Protection and Climate Change by Prime Minister Mitsotakis indeed is gradually making a change. And you can see that, like I said before, the KPIs are there. For instance, the introduction of 112, and now that we're going to the new generation 112, means that we have managed to minimize fatalities. In Cyprus, the recent developments, the recent announcement by President Nikos Christodoulides was that we're going to have a brand new ministry, which is going to be the Ministry of Interior and Civil Protection. And it is going to house all these different actors that are there. And this is going to make a big difference as well. It is not only a matter of bureaucracy and geometry and geography and choreography within the public sector, but it makes sense as well. Two things and two important steps that I believe, three actually, I just remembered of one extra. We need to adopt new but old methods, again, like grazing, like controlled burning. Why? Because we need more hands in the deck. We need more people involved, A. B, we need to create a culture. I have been hearing since the morning the word culture, and absolutely everyone, I think, is looking towards establishing a culture. Let's go back to our younger years, like 5 years ago, and you will remember that at school, we were taught things, and we developed a culture. Was it a good culture? Was it a bad culture? I'm not going to judge that. But we need to go back and establish national education plans. And I'm happy to see the minister having very frequent meetings with the Minister of Education in Greece, and I think this is a paradigm. Like this is something that should be replicated. Why do we need this? Because we need to communicate risk effectively to the people, because we are not communicating risk effectively at the moment. Two tools that we have. One is the Sendai framework, which is actually a master plan, and with regards to the cost, all the answers are there. It talks about PPIs and various other things. And secondly, and finally, President Ursula von der Leyen, if I'm not mistaken, announced the EU Preparedness Union strategy, which talks about a whole-of-society approach. If you actually decipher the messages of this new strategy, it actually talks about every single part of our societies being involved in managing and actually trying to minimize those risks that we have been talking about. Last point, we need more data. We're making decisions, we're still using empirical rules. This is out of order, I think. We live in an era of communication. We should have more data. We must generate more data. We need to be clever on what data we need. If we simply replicate the data that we are receiving, we're not going anywhere, because this is the outcome of the data that we're receiving. We must act cleverly. We must think what we want to calculate in terms of risk, and then go back, reverse engineering, and come up with sources of data that are going to give us these parameters that are going to help us in this risk calculation.
If I can piggyback on this point, what we have to be very careful, George, and I saw this in the fires in Los Angeles, you can be data rich and wisdom poor. Mm-hmm. So actually learning, and I mean, it is where, in fact, AI hasn't really made it down to the decision room, where, I mean, all this, data, sometimes, and this is what happened in Altadena, I mean, one region was evacuated, the other region was not. They had data, they had all the data in the world, but exactly because they had not practiced and they didn't know, I mean, again, the wisdom, unfortunately, was not there. So this is something that science can add to the crisis management room, and I think we have, I am also an optimist, we have a fantastic future ahead with AI to be able to actually use. In Greece, we need more data. You're absolutely correct. We don't have them. And I mean, Santorini was a case in point, as we were running around like headless chicken to try to find out and get more data. But along with the data, we need the wisdom. And
for sure.
This will go to
let me say that
very briefly, please.
Yeah, but 30 seconds. I agree 100% with you. Let me just add something else, that I'm a firm believer that fires are a social issue, not an engineering problem. So we need the data, but at the same point, we need to have the assessment teams by the people. Thank you.
Okay. Elena.
Very, very briefly, I think it's also very important to acknowledge that we can't base future decisions on historic data.
For sure. Yeah.
And I think that's somehow very often still in policy making. People look at, okay, what happened in history, whereas nostalgia is no longer a strategy. So we are dealing with completely different parameters. The other thing is that the data itself isn't a solution. It has to become decision relevant.
Yeah.
And that's very often the missing part, is the interface between the very, very sophisticated data that we have a lot of and the people at local and regional level who actually make the decisions about, okay, where do we invest, where do we build resilience? Right. And that innovation is an untapped resource that we really need to make use of.
Okay. I want to give the last word to the Minister, who's very patiently sat and taken on board all of the advice that he's been given. Your reflection on what you've heard, how do you translate all of that into concrete policy action as a minister in a government?
Θα πω πολύ σύντομα το εξής, ότι ως Ελλάδα, αλλά φαντάζομαι και πολλές χώρες, ειδικά του μεσογειακού χώρου, έχουμε γίνει πολύ πιο σοφοί μέσα από δυστυχώς τις καταστροφές τις οποίες βιώσαμε. Θα συμφωνήσω με τον Γιώργο στα φετινά δεδομένα, όπου η Ελλάδα, για παράδειγμα, είχε φέτος μείωση περίπου 5% σε σχέση με το μέσο όρο της 20ετίας, σε σχέση με τις καμένες εκτάσεις. Ένα δεδομένο το οποίο εμένα με εξέπληξε, αλλά έχει ερμηνεία, είναι για παράδειγμα ότι το Ηνωμένο Βασίλειο φέτος, σε απόλυτους αριθμούς, έχει περισσότερες καμένες εκτάσεις από ό,τι έχει η Ελλάδα. Σύμφωνα με τα στοιχεία από το ΕΦΙΣ, του Κομπέρνικο, μπορεί κάποιος να μπει μέσα, είναι open data και μπορεί να τα δει. Συνεπώς, μπορούμε πραγματικά, όντως, να έχουμε χρήσιμα συμπεράσματα και μαθήματα από τις καταστροφές τις οποίες βιώσαμε, αλλά συμφωνώ ότι θα πρέπει να χρησιμοποιήσουμε πλέον καινούργια εργαλεία, να εκπαιδεύσουμε την κοινή γνώμη. Αυτό για μένα είναι η μεγαλύτερη μεταρρύθμιση που μπορούμε να κάνουμε για τις κοινωνίες μας. Και βεβαίως πλέον αυτό το οποίο αποδείχθηκε, και θα ήθελα δημοσίως να ευχαριστήσω και όλους τους θεσμούς στην Ευρωπαϊκή Ένωση, ότι η αλληλεγγύη μεταξύ των κρατών είναι κάτι το οποίο πραγματικά μπορεί να μας δώσει το added value σε αυτή την προσπάθεια.
Excellent. Thank you. Maybe I should just stay in Athens and not go back to the UK. It sounds like it's
safer.
like I'm safer here. This brings us to a very interesting point, I think, in our conference. It sort of rounds things out a bit because we've talked an awful lot over the last 2 days about theory, about prediction, and about risk. And I think this panel sort of brings home how concrete all of this is. That there isn't time to reflect, to think, and to ponder. Action is required right now, and thankfully is being taken with plenty of guidance from our academic and policy friends. So we're going to leave it there for this panel. Our next panel is the youth climate leadership, and they need to finish on time because they have to go home for tea and bedtime. So please join me in thanking another excellent panel. Thank you very much.